Welcome into the best in paranormal talk radio, Darkness Radio. I'm Tim Dennis in for Dave Schrader. A couple of notes for you here before we get started with tonight's show. And we do have a jam-packed show for you tonight. Our guest in the first hour here, Ian Patterson, and we'll be talking about our untold history, Black Ops, aliens, spirits, Bigfoot, our untold history, and looking forward to this. The Palmer House trip for February is up and going right now. Tickets are going fast for this. It's myself, Dave, and Bill Chappell. And brand new equipment, brand new seminars, everything, ghost hunting. And it's going on at the Haunted Historic Palmer House in Sauk Center, Minnesota in February. Go to darknessevents.com, darknessevents.com to get your tickets. Limited spots available for this trip in February. So you're going to want to get your tickets right away. They make great Christmas gifts. They make great holiday gifts. So make sure you get your tickets right away. Just click on the banner that has all three of our mugs up there. And believe it or not, added to it, Michael and Marty Perry. And their gallery, by the way, gallery session, not included in the event ticket price, but they'll be there as well. So it's going to be a full weekend there at the Palmer House. Be sure to get your event ticket right now, darknessevents.com. I have another passion. It's called professional wrestling, and I am your vice president and your MC for IWI at the Haunted Historic Mounds Theater. And we run again a week from Saturday, November 19th. It is Hollywood Brian Sager's last match. He's retiring, and he is our U.S. champion. He'll be defending his title for one last time. November 19th, you can get your tickets at moundstheater.org. Again, moundstheater.org. Let's get into our show, shall we? I'm excited to have our next guest. Ian Patterson was born in the UK. Over the last 30 years, his research has led him to conclude that a number of conspiracy theories and phenomena ranging from Bigfoot to aliens are deeply interwoven, and we'll talk about that tonight. His journey started with a field trip to the Natural History Museum. At just 6 years old, he instinctively knew that then the evolution pictures shown there were not quite right. His belief in spirits, ghosts began when his father passed away, and he had an experience when his mother, or with his mother, and a homemade Ouija board. And we'll talk about that right away. Let's bring into the Darkness on the Edge of Town paranormal radio show, Ian Patterson. Good evening, Ian. How are you?
Hi, thank you. I'm fine. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Doing good. Let's jump into spirits right away, and let's jump into the Ouija board. A lot of people would think Ouija boards are a dangerous thing to mess with, but tell me a little bit about that experience with your mother, and you contacted your father with the Ouija board?
Yeah. Originally, I had no intention of sort of getting involved in that side of things. Kind of scared more than anything. Mm-hmm. I didn't really want to believe that ghosts were real or anything like that. And my mum actually made a homemade Ouija board, literally cut out pieces of paper and wrote A, B, C, D, and did them in a sort of semicircle, and then some numbers underneath. And one day I turned up there, and she was waiting for my sister to help her do this Ouija board, and they've done it before. But my sister was late, so my mum sort of said to me, "Do you mind helping me with the Ouija board?" And I was like, "Oh," my dad had passed sort of a couple of years before, so I reluctantly I sort of thought, well, okay, I'm gonna unfortunately burst my mum's bubble when this glass doesn't move. So I put my finger on it. The glass. She asked a couple of questions, and the glass started to move. And I thought, okay, so I took my finger off, thinking she's pushing it, or I'm pushing it subconsciously, and it stopped. My mum sort of looked at me, why are you taking your finger off? Because I sort of said, well, because I don't really want to make you look silly, Mum. So anyway, we carried on, and she asked a couple of more questions, and the glass actually moved everywhere that she was like asking questions. It would say yes. And my dad wasn't a great speller, so she was keeping it simple for him, and apparently it was my dad. So I, being a sort of not a skeptic but very logical person, thought, well, okay, let's narrow this down. So I said to my mum, I'm going to ask Dad a question. So I said out loud, "Can you hear my thoughts?" So the glass actually moved to Y for yes. So I thought, okay, right. So I thought, I'm going to ask the question that my mum won't know the answer to.
Okay.
So I put my finger on the glass, and I thought, right, okay, my dad's not a great speller, so I know I'll just see if it moves to the letter K. So I said in my head, "Can you move to the letter K?" And it did. the hairs on my back of my neck stood up, and it stopped. And my mum said, "Why has it stopped?" Because she was actually expecting it to carry on moving to spell a word. And I did this about 3 or 4 times, asking it to move to different things, and it did. And then I realised, okay, it's not me pushing it, it's not my mum pushing it. There really is something to this. Before that, I actually believed in aliens and sort of, well, mainly aliens, really. And then at that point, I had no choice but to believe that there was something out there after death.
Well, let me ask you this, Ian. And I'll ask you the kind of tough question here. How do you know it was your father? How do you know that it wasn't just something disguising itself as your father, trying to get your trust so that it could communicate with you?
My mum would ask sort of questions, "Where are you now?" And he said in the pub, and my dad was always in the pub. And she asked a couple of other questions that I don't know whether other spirits would know what he knows. I don't know whether they all interconnect once they're on the other side. But he answered the questions as my mum would have expected them to be answered for my dad. She did say to me before we started that sometimes she doesn't get my dad, so I'm guessing that that time it was definitely my dad. And I haven't done it since, and I don't think my mum's done it since. My sister knocked at the door shortly after I did the 3 or 4 times. And I opened the door and she said to me, "What's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." Because I must have been pale, because of it was a shock, to have my dad possibly moving this glass around, which at that time I had no choice but to believe in the end, really. There's no other way of doubting it.
When your mom says to you, sometimes your dad doesn't come through, sometimes it's somebody else, does that kind of raise the hairs on the back of your neck? Does that make you think?
Yes, it does, and that's kind of why after she'd done it and I started to look into it, I sort of said to her, "Mum, probably not a good idea to keep doing this," because the more I sort of looked into it, the more I realised that you can open a can of worms, and I didn't really want to doing that. But even prior to that, my mum was having electrical issues with sort of what they call a virgin box, which is like your sort of cable box over there. And lights were flickering. My dad had always said to my mum that when he goes, he's going to sort of let her know she's there. And my mum had called engineers in and to try and fix this box that just kept turning off. And they about 3 or 4 times they couldn't fix it. And then one day my mum turned around and said, "Look, I know it's you." His name is Bob. "I know it's you, Bob. Can you now stop?" And from that moment on, he'd stopped no electrical faults whatsoever.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Kind of walk me through this a little bit. Your belief in aliens from your belief in spirits. How does your belief in aliens kind of flesh itself out? What was your first encounter that made you think that maybe there was life out there somewhere?
It was, well, there was no sort of defining point. Just as I was growing up, I'd watch things that came on TV, and I'd started to use logic and think, well, okay, yeah, we're not alone, and then I'd sort of not research it as such in a deep way, but try and lap up as much as I could. I think it was more of an inherent belief that there was, just sheer amount of things you'd see in the papers, about UFOs and things. And then really it was around the time I was about 23 when I met a friend of mine introduced me to someone that was in the Air Force. And at the time I was making sort of homemade movies, and I wanted to make a documentary on aliens, and my friend introduced me to this person that said he knew a lot about aliens. So I met this guy in a car park, and we stood there for 3 hours talking. I was kind of expecting to meet him later on or another day to sort of sit down with a camera and film and make this sort of very low budget documentary that I didn't know what I'd do with, but I thought it was worth doing. But for the 3 hours, he started off talking about, discs and craft and all sorts of things. And then he got, talking about Alpha Centauri, and he was naming other places that I'd not heard of before. But during the 3 hours, he started talking about orbs and spirits and stuff. And I thought, why is this guy connecting these to UFOs? I thought, and back then there was no internet, so I didn't really know anything about orbs or spirits. and as unfortunately he didn't come back the next time I was supposed to meet him. He apparently went away. But everything that he'd sort of said that I'd remembered because I didn't write it down. Over the years, listening to other people and researching, I found a lot of this. Well, pretty much everything that I remember he had said had sort of been validated by other people, which then led me to believe that he was actually someone in the UK Royal Air Force that did actually know stuff.
You know what, Ian? Let's do this. Let's take a break right now. When we come back, I want to find out this information that you found out. How do you connect spirits, orbs, and aliens? Because this is an intriguing connection that I want to kind of dig into. When we come back, we'll talk more with Ian Patterson about that connection between spirits, orbs, and aliens. Again, the book is called Our Untold History. I'm sorry, the author of Black Ops, Aliens, Spirits, Bigfoot, and Our Untold History is the name of the book. OurUntoldHistory.com is the website. Ian Patterson is the author and our guest tonight on the best in paranormal talk radio, Darkness Radio. For the break, Ian, we were talking a little bit about spirits, orbs, and aliens, and the connection between those two. You said you had met a fellow who had formerly been with the Air Force, I believe, and he had put this connection together for you. Now, I'm curious, what is the connection? Because I've heard people talk about it briefly before, but no one's ever put the puzzle pieces together for us. Could you put the pieces together for us?
I'll try my best.
Okay.
So, the sort of in a sort of nutshell,
okay,
from what I can tell, the crop circles, which are formed by the orb type entities, if you want to call them, for want of a better word, they are connected to the greys. Now, to me, there's two different types of greys. There's the Orion greys and the Zeta greys. And from what I can understand, the Zeta greys are in connection with these orbs, which are also the spirits of the people that get inhabited by these spirits. So forgive me. So I need to sort of start from the spirit side of it. So
sure.
The way I see the spirits they are entities that live in, I'll call it an ocean, and they're all connected. And one spirit can, but they're not actually spirits at that point. They're entities. They can leave that ocean, and then that sort of one drop can then split into many different drops of water, for want of a better word, and then those individual drops would then enter an unborn child around about the 40-week mark, and possibly, I mean, I say possibly because obviously nothing's 100% proven, but they enter the pineal gland, and then they connect with the human, and then when the human dies, when the gland ceases to get blood anymore, the entity, which is a spirit, then leaves the body and can either go back and join that original drop and then go back into the ocean. And that's why when sometimes you speak to people like mediums and they say is they're looking for someone, and on the other side the spirit would say, no, that person has moved on to the other side. So it's kind of weird. We say that the spirits moved over to the other side, but the spirits, when you're looking for someone, would say that spirits moved over to the other side. So what I believe happens is that spirit, if it moves back over to the other side, actually goes back into the sort of collective ocean. But they've got a council of higher level entities,
okay,
which work with the greys. So when you're before you're actually joined with this spirit, you are asked, would you want to be upgraded or connected with the greys in some way? And so your spirit would say yes. And then so when you're born, as you go older, grow up, the aliens can abduct you, technically not against your will, because the spirit inside you has actually said yes, go ahead and do that. So then they date you and mess around with your DNA. So that's all sort of agreed before before your spirit is even born, and that's why when sometimes someone dies, a spirit can leave them, but if they get resuscitated, another spirit can enter them, which may have different traits from a previous person, which is why people can suddenly paint or create music which they couldn't before, and that would be classed as a past life regression. So the spirits are connected to the aliens that I can see in that way, and then the Bigfoots, the amount of
wait. I gotta stop you right there, Ian. Now, let me try and clarify something here. So, when it comes to the abduction, let's use me for an example, okay? Let's say I encounter grays or aliens. They come down, they abduct me, they do whatever experiments or implants they do on me. After I've been worked on, are you saying at that point my soul has left my body and come back?
No.
Okay. What's been done? I've been upgraded so that now I have new abilities, or my soul's been tampered with, or what exactly has happened to me at that point?
Right. So you, when you're abducted, you wouldn't know what's going on, but your spirit that's agreed prior to you even being born had agreed. So whatever their task is for you, in this case, let's just say they want to increase some part of your brain, they would operate on you without you knowing, but technically your spirit knows about this and agreed to that before you were born. So they almost sort of choose who they want. The spirit almost chooses who they want to go with before you're even, as you're sort of being born up to the 40 weeks, and then they say, okay, we'll go for this person. I mean, I don't know the absolute ins and outs of it, but that's the way I sort of see it. And so you being abducted was something that was agreed to prior to you.
So what is going on then with people who are abducted multiple times? Is this like a multiple upgrade type thing? And why is this like I hate to use this analogy, but is this like a car that's a car that keeps getting upgraded multiple times? Like you put a bigger engine in, you do this, you do that, you put neon on the bottom or whatever it is you're doing to this car?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, they would take you back and check up on the previous thing that they've done to you, so it's not always a new upgrade. For example, what I believe's happened in certain cases is where people's had small radiation marks. I believe that they have been tested on, because in space you get a certain amount of radiation, and I think it's partly to help the black ops that are also abducting humans to actually work out the best way to counteract space radiation. So I can't see any other reason why people that have been abducted have small radiation marks, unless it's to test something that they've done to them previously to see whether the radiation has a different effect to them.
Now, why upgrade somebody? Is it because evolution can't get you there fast enough, or because we as a species can't get there fast enough? Is that why?
That's a good question. I mean, I can't help but think, what's wrong with us? Leave us alone. We're fine. We'll get there in the end. But the way I sort of read into this is that they've got their own agendas. The Black Ops people have got their own agendas, and eventually the group of people. I mean, from what I can gather, there's tens of millions of people that's been abducted that don't even know it. So eventually these abducted people or their offspring, which will be hybrids, I can't see it any other way, but I think they will eventually take over the planet, possibly not in a bad way, just because they need some other type of creature on this planet that can do certain things that we can't. I mean, we can't telepathically talk to someone, but literally every other alien that we've ever heard of can talk to each other, and we can't. So there's certain things that we can't do. So an upgrade for them to be able to deal with us wouldn't be such a bad thing.
Let me ask you this question. How is it that And how does it that aliens play into the whole circuit of the afterlife and our religious beliefs? Is it like they cut you off at the pass? Like you're on your way to the afterlife and heaven or whatever pocket dimension you believe in, and they step in and go, whoa, time out. You can do this, but we can upgrade you. Is that how they come in, or are they part of the whole circle of life?
No, I don't. I've not seen any connection between aliens when you die, when your spirit leaves your body.
Okay.
I can only see the connection before they actually enter your body. So I think each spirit goes up a different level, a different plane of existence, or higher plane. Once they have gone round enough to have learned, you've probably heard it yourself. People call Earth the playground.
Mm-hmm.
So they or the learning ground. So the spirit has to go through a certain amount of times before it can sort of ascend to a higher level. And so that's why I can't see any connection after with actual aliens.
All right. Wow. Okay, now I tell you what, this is probably the point where we should take a break because you mentioned you threw a whole big chunk in here about Bigfoot. And so when we come back, we'll throw that chunk in there and how Bigfoot fits into this whole stew. I got to admit, Ian, you've already kind of blown my mind a little bit here, but I want to put this in bite-sized chunks so our audience can kind of digest it all. Our guest is Ian Patterson, the author of Black Ops, Aliens, Spirits, Bigfoot, and Our Untold History. When we come back, we'll figure out how Bigfoot has to do with upgrading us, along with aliens. It's all coming up next here on the best in Paranormal Talk Radio. This is Darkness Radio. You can check out his website, ouruntoldhistory.com. When we left you at the break, we were talking about how aliens are involved in upgrading our bodies. In that, Ian, you said there is a piece that has to do with Bigfoot. Now, how does Bigfoot play into this whole deal?
Okay, so the way I see Bigfoot is the Bigfoot that's on Earth at the moment was transported here possibly by a prison ship that crashed possibly around 40,000 years ago. The inhabitants stayed on Earth. But the actual race of Bigfoots are spacefaring creatures, intelligent creatures that can telepathically talk to each other. And how I got to work out that they're actually connected is there was a gentleman called Robert Hall in the UK, and he'd told a story that when he was about 5, he saw along with some other children. He saw, which is back in the 40s, he saw a spaceship, sort of a dish-shaped, land at the end of his cul-de-sac street. Mm-hmm. And little greys came out and they telepathically told him that they're going to inject something into the back of his neck and he shouldn't look up, otherwise he'll die. But he remembered seeing this, what he then sort of described as a Wookiee, from Star Wars, a very tall, hairy ape standing up on 2 legs. Mm-hmm. And that got me thinking, well, okay, well, if he's how many other people has actually seen Bigfoot along with the Greys or any other aliens? Mm-hmm. And researching it, there's so many people who have seen either Bigfoot's coming out of craft or leaving craft. So when you hear this is the way I see it, when you hear the stories that Bigfoot throws rocks at people to scare them off, I believe that that's the indigenous alien, Bigfoots that's on Earth. But the ones that make a sound or just suddenly disappear are not the ones from Earth. They're the ones that's come down from spacecraft to do whatever they're doing at that time. So there's a connection there between the Greys and Bigfoot. And then researching it more, I found that there was a lot of connection between orbs and Bigfoot. In fact, I think I remember hearing somewhere that someone had said that the Bigfoot had died and another Bigfoot sort of was walking back with an orb, which I guess could have been its soul or spirit. So I think we're the sort of ones that don't know anything that's going on, and they've all sort of, everything's sort of connected, including not the indigenous Bigfoot, but the space race ones that's out there.
Well, now the ones that are just disappearing, how are they disappearing? Is that a form of teleportation, or what are they? How are they just getting out of here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that then leads on to the portals, which
Okay.
I kind of believe that there is some type of portals. There's just too many stories where things just sort of disappear. And can I just interject something
Sure.
that I actually didn't write in the book, but
Okay.
no, I think I did write it in the book. Basically, about 5 years ago, I was on holiday in Tenerife,
Mm-hmm.
and I was laying there on the beach and looking up, and it was absolutely clear blue sky. And I remember thinking to myself at that moment in time, I thought, oh, wow, there's not a cloud in the sky. How lovely. And then suddenly, from left to right, this black object just appeared from nowhere. And then from left to right, as it went, it sort of turned, sort of in a not sort of 90-degree arc, and then went back to the right. So I thought, well, so I nudged my partner who was beside me, and I said, "Look at that," because originally I thought it was a bird flying, but then I realised it wasn't. And she had better eyesight than me, so she said, "Oh no, it's a diamond-shaped thing," which I thought I'd not heard of a diamond-shaped UFO at that point. So I went straight back to the hotel. Well, actually, I waited to figure out how fast it was moving. There was no sound. And then about 5 minutes later, I saw a black helicopter fly over towards the direction that it went. And I sort of timed how long the helicopter took to get from A to B. And I kind of worked out that the diamond-shaped thing was a lot quicker than the helicopter.
Okay.
So I went back to the hotel room, got on the phone, and looked up diamond-shaped UFOs over Tenerife, and lo and behold, there was loads of videos of diamond-shaped going towards Mount Teide. So what then made me think was, okay, it came out of nowhere. It must have been a portal, because if it just appeared sort of like, uncloaked itself, it wouldn't have gone from left to right and then back to the right. It would have just been going from the right. There's no reason for it to have turned. So that then led me into the portal phenomenon, and the stories of Bigfoot disappearing, along with people disappearing, started to make me think then that the portals were, on Earth, in which case creatures can actually go through them. Sometimes, obviously, Bigfoot could possibly be beamed up in a light beam on the ships, but some of them could possibly be going through a portal.
Interesting indeed. I can't claim to know how Bigfoot disappears, but a lot of Bigfoot researchers would say, well, if they subscribe to the mammal deal, they would say, well, it's clever camouflage or whatever. I mean, I guess you could subscribe to that, but it's funny how they just kind of disappear into nowhere when they claim you see a footprint and then it just disappears. There's nothing. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But portal, an interesting theory. I'll give you that. You mentioned Black Ops, and we've got about 3 minutes left in this segment. How do Black Ops tie into this, and what do you subscribe to when you say Black Ops? Black Ops is kind of a large painted picture that you could just throw out there and say, it could be any agency. Well, can you pin down a specific government agency when you say Black Ops? Who do they belong to?
The NSA keeps popping up, and the British MI5 pop up as well. So for me, it's a few different companies as such, all run by a few people, which I guess you kind of know who those people are. The ones that the elite, as they say.
Well, now again, there's that huge. You can paint the huge. Are you afraid to say when you say elite? Are you afraid to say who?
Well, there's generally 13 names that seem to keep popping up all over the place, and some people say that those are all in a bloodline. All those people belong to a certain type of bloodline, possibly the Anunnaki. Mm-hmm. But there's one particular person straight away that I can count out. So there's lots of theories that the Rockefellers were, part of the bloodline. But if you actually look at it, the way that Rockefeller actually made his money, he was nobody until he managed to get the deal with the petroleum and the oil, and so there could be other people with bloodlines, but unless you've got the money. So I see the Rockefellers as someone that bought into the secret societies that help run the Black Ops and the other covert operations.
Let me ask you this, and let me see if you can tie this all in a neat bow, because some people can, some people can't. Can you tie secret societies right back to anything when it comes to aliens?
I've looked into the bloodline. The problem is I don't actually have the bloodlines of certain individuals. It comes back to the rhesus negative, which I don't know if you're aware of, that doctors can't seem to agree why we've got the rhesus negative, because it actually can kill babies, depending on whether the mother's got it and the father's got it, that type of thing.
Right.
So I've tried to look as far back as I can, but I can't actually get the blood types of these certain people that are said to have been sort of direct descendants of aliens, the Anunnaki, which I've got a different name for the Anunnaki, which I can tell you later if you want, because the Anunnaki is a silly name for a race to call themselves, because it possibly means those who heaven came to earth, which no race would actually call themselves that. It's like us calling ourselves, Earth 3. We would have needed to know that there's two other planets before we called ourselves Earth 3. So, but no direct link. But there's plenty of stories of the Illuminati and Masons, etc., all having connections with aliens and possibly giant bones that they've got locked away in vaults and things like that.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take our break here. When we come back, let's talk Anunnaki and that name and why it may seem a little ridiculous. Our guest is Ian Patterson. The book is Black Ops, Aliens, Spirits, Bigfoot, and Our Untold History. Available right now at Amazon.com and Kindle. And check out his website, OurUntoldHistory.com. When we come back, the Anunnaki right here on Darkness Radio. Had to be done on that spirit. That's coming up next hour here on Darkness Radio. This hour, Ian Patterson is our guest, the author of Black Ops, Aliens, Spirits, Bigfoot, and Our Untold History. You can check him out at OurUntoldHistory.com. Ian, before the break, we were talking about the Anunnaki and why the name is kind of ridiculous for this group. Explain why the name is so ridiculous.
Okay, so the Anunnaki, as converted by Zachariah Stitchin, says that the name relates to those who came from heaven to earth, if I've got that right. Some debunkers actually say that the tablets that was deciphered say that the names are princely seeds or princely blood, which actually kind of validates the fact that there are aliens, because the writings that talk about the Anunnaki say that two princes came down, or at least one prince to start with, Enki and then Enlil. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Oh, so why the name is a little ridiculous to be calling the Anunnaki that?
Yeah, so we can call it the Anunnaki, but everywhere that you read on the stone tablets and everything that basically was written back in ancient Mesopotamia talks about everything. It talks about Enki, Anu, talks about so much stuff. There's the only things it doesn't actually talk about is how the pyramids were built, even the ones, the Zutgats that were built in Mesopotamia. And the only other thing it doesn't talk about is their race name. We call them the Anunnaki, but obviously that's not what they would call themselves. So the only word that actually, I have to sort of spell it out, because as soon as you say it, people say, no, that can't be right. But the only word that's actually there that talks about them as a race is the word Elohim. So I know straight away people will think, well, okay, Elohim means God. But if you was a person and you went to another planet, you would say, my name is Tim, I'm a human. So they would write down human, and after thousands of years, they would worship the human as a god.
Mm-hmm.
So Elohim, I believe, is the actual name of their race, which is why it's written everywhere. Some people say Elohim means in plural gods or God, but it's no different from someone calling you a human or humans on another planet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I've heard the name Elohim before. Actually, a good friend of our show, Scotty Roberts, he talks about the Elohim, and I've heard some other people who have talked about the Elohim before, and have addressed the Anunnaki as the Elohim. Although I think because Zecharia Sitchin has put that out there, and it really has been marketed as the Anunnaki, I think that name tends to stick. So in your opinion, how is it that you can, I don't know, I guess for lack of a better phrase, how is it that you remarket the Anunnaki to the Elohim? How do you change people's minds on that renaming?
I don't think you can, to be honest, because, reading the Bible, people are sort of stuck in their ways. I mean, I don't mean that in disrespect, but it's very hard to get someone's mindset changed from what they read. I had a friend of mine today actually finished my book, and he rang me up and asked me lots of questions, but he's a Mormon, and he sort of said, oh, well, it's all fascinating, some excellent theories and sort of facts, but he said, I still believe what I believe, so I don't think we can change people's minds now. I think it's too far gone for people to change from Anunnaki to Elohim.
Got about 4.5 minutes here with you here, Ian, and I'm curious to know your outlook on time travel with everything that we talked about tonight with aliens and Bigfoot and even space travel. How do you feel about time travel? What's your outlook on time travel?
I've got a section in the book about time travel. Yeah, I believe it's possible from. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, do you believe that we are actually dealing with time travel right now? That our government is actually doing something with a secret space program and time travel?
Yes, I do. It all stems back from the Philadelphia experiment. But then unfortunately, there's people that I don't want to mention someone's name, but who sort of claims as a kid that he went through and time traveled that way.
Oh, we're familiar with Andrew Bishago. You can mention him.
All right. Okay. Yeah. One of the problems I have with that is he says he goes back in time because they want to test the effects on children. Mm-hmm. But I cannot get my head around why a scientist didn't go back with him, because if something happened to him back there, he had a headache, felt dizzy, nosebleed or whatever, mm-hmm. and died there, then their experiment would have just ended there, and then they would not have known what the problem was. So I do believe they're messing around with time travel, but I struggle with certain people going back on their own as a kid and not having the scientists with them. So
the thing though with Andrew is that his story is so airtight. When you talk with him, I mean, we've had him on a few times, and actually we had him on before the presidential election. Spoiler alert, he didn't win. But he was convinced that he even tells a story of having gone through the program with President Barack Obama, and that people who had gone through this program were groomed eventually to become president, and different ranking members of government were called from this program. To me, it seems like he has all these things together, that these details are so put together so well that you just listen to it and you're kind of in awe with how tight the story is,
I've looked into him a lot, but it's just that one thing that where he says he just went back on his own.
You're right. Yeah.
I just can't think that someone spending that amount of money on equipment and secretive and everything like that just to let a child go back. That's the one part that gets me. So the rest of it might be true. He might have just sort of forgotten and something like that. But that's the one bit that gets me.
That and the vastness of the program, and how huge a program of that size, and that there are not more people talking about it. and that there's not more information about it and that there hasn't been more leaked about it, I think to me, says to me that, hey, although your story is very good and you've got a lot of details and your timeline's excellent, and boy, you can keep a lot together. And keep in mind, he's a lawyer, so yeah, he's got to have his story straight. I just find it a little hard to believe. But other than that, I mean, the guy's got his stuff together. I got to give him that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you know about the Philadelphia experiment, but
quite a bit,
yeah. I mean, that does seem the logical step from them to go from there onwards onto time travel. So I can see, and you know what your government's like, anything to sort of military that they can turn into a military device, they would do. And so once they found time travel possible, I think they would have certainly done it by now.
Right. Ian, our time is up, unfortunately. Ian is the author of Black Ops, Aliens, Spirits, Bigfoot, and Our Untold History. Check him out at his website, ouruntoldhistory.com. You can pick up the book at amazon.com. It's also available on Kindle. Ian Patterson has been our guest. Ian, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you very much.
And thank you. We appreciate you being with us. Again, coming up next hour, our guest is Michelle. Trying to grab the guest here, Michelle Zirkle Markham. That's it. Rain No Evil. We'll be talking about a spirit manifesting itself as water and how she gets rid of that spirit. Again, Michelle Zirkle Markham coming up after the break here on the Best in Paranormal Talk Radio. This is Darkness.
Good evening. Welcome back to the show. The Omniverse, Trans-Dimensional Intelligence, Time Travel, the Afterlife, and the Secret Colony on Mars. Our guest this evening, Alfred Lambermont Weber. And Alfred, coming back into this, you talked about the fact that we're at this new precipice, that things are coming into a position where we're going to be able to do replicable experiments and prove the theories and belief systems behind the Omniverse and behind these different aspects. But it still sounds like a lot of it is just conjecture and possibilities as opposed to reality of proof. And I know you were talking about when you go to court and how you have to prove, certain things beyond a reasonable doubt, and you have to be able to prove things to people to show them that this is what is acceptable. But in these kind of cases, isn't it where the problem breaks down between skepticism, science, and the fantasy is what is considered proof?
Right. Well, look, you asked me, how do you prove the existence of the soul in the afterlife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the methodologies that we have, and this goes to proof not beyond a reasonable doubt, but proof more probably than not. And that's a different threshold. And
right, but then does that mean that science will accept it, though?
Is a database of more than 7,000 cases of soul memories of the interlife. And this is where you have a standard laboratory protocol for hypnotic regression with trained therapists who take subjects into hypnotic regression and lead them through their recounting of their memories of their time in the interlife. What the interlife is another word of the afterlife, but it's more reincarnation friendly, because in reincarnation...
But who's setting up the protocols to say, because hypnotherapy, from my understanding, is still not a proven enough science that all science accepts it?
Well, this is data. This is replicable data according to a standard protocol,
But kind of following up with that again, who set the standard for that protocol when a lot of science still does not accept hypnotherapy as a true science in itself? How do you set a protocol for something which isn't universally recognized?
Well, you can set protocols in many, many different sciences. For example, the two key sciences in the study of the omniverse are exopolitics and parapsychology. And the study of the afterlife, in this case, falls into the area of parapsychology, which is the study of expanded human abilities, including telepathy. And what we found is that two of the prime characteristics of the omniverse, that is, the way that it functions, is number one, the prime communication mode in the omniverse is telepathy, and the prime transportation mode is teleportation. Now, those are two areas, for both of which there is proof, and both of which are studied. Telepathy has been studied in the U.S. Very closely, going back to the 1930s at Duke with Rhine. You have the American Society for Psychical Research. You have a very developed body of scientific knowledge in parapsychology. Now, the issues that you are raising is whether exopolitics and parapsychology are part of the scientific canon, and that is a matter of evolution, and that is more and more universities are beginning to acknowledge the expanded aspects of human consciousness, and to allow and to permit and to authorize courses of study in parapsychology on telepathy and on allied areas in their courses of study, so that there isn't the blanket stonewalling of these areas by the canon that there was back in the 50s, so that we're dealing with frontier sciences, and but that doesn't make it any less science. In the same way, many of the theories that in physics and in other sciences are theories that are just have been developed over the last decade, and so we have rigorous scientific protocols that have been developed by scientists such as Dr. Michael Newton and others that have reviewed over 7,000 cases of individuals that have gone in through hypnotic regression and have accessed their memories, their soul memories of what occurred in the interlife. And this is not only in the interlife. For example, if you take the work of Professor Ian Stevenson, who passed over just recently, but he was a professor at the University of Virginia Medical School, and his studies of reincarnation are highly scientific, and they're all based on protocols, and they include hypnotic regression, and that is the time typically children between the ages of 3 and 9 will have spontaneous memories of their prior lives in which they'll give detailed descriptions of their immediate prior life, which then can be gone back and can be checked up on. And this is the work that Dr. Ian Stevenson did at the University of Virginia Medical School, which is being carried on. So that what they're using here are fairly standard social science techniques and protocols which qualify as the scientific, as the.
But then why do you think science on the whole is not accepting the theory of reincarnation as an actual event? I mean, you've got some compelling, just like you've got the near-death experiences, which are very compelling, and they've put the signs up in the ceilings and on the ceiling tiles and places where the soul claims to kind of hang out, and people are witnessing and reporting back these little symbols that some of the hospitals have set up to test that protocol, and they're getting the results that they were expecting because they're getting these quote-unquote out-of-body experiencers to tell about these certain designs very clearly and concisely, but yet science still is not looking at it on the whole as a recognizable fact or truth.
Yeah, but I submit, since we're having a kind of a back and forth here, I submit that what you're using as the word science is not accurate.
Okay.
There isn't a scientific canon, and there isn't an authority someplace that says this isn't science, because.
Well, actually, there's a lot of people that come out and say that isn't. They refer to it as pseudoscience and fracture
that's not true. I mean, more and more the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson and more the work of the parapsychologist is accepted. And it's funded. I mean, when I was at Stanford Research Institute, the CIA funded to in the millions of dollars my colleagues' work on remote viewing, which is in the same area as telepathy and clairvoyance, and so here you have the CIA and the U.S. Department of Defense putting tens of millions of dollars and relying the U.S. spy system on remote viewing, which has to do with expanded abilities of the human mind, which are
they've
in the
also
same family as telepathy, precognition, and other expanded abilities of the human mind. So there isn't now, more often than not, the individuals that are expressing those opinions are individuals who have been discredited in science because they represent prejudices from the past that are not at all, valid. And all of the programs that I've been associated with in my more than 40 years experience, which include programs where the CIA and the Department of Defense has put in tens of millions of dollars, consider these abilities of the human race to be very, very well within the scientific canon.
But a lot of those sciences and a lot of the, taking out the word science, a lot of those research programs have been abandoned and considered either extremely flawed and ineffective for what they were trying to do. When you look at the Project Stargate and you look at some of the other remote viewing programs, they're no longer officially working. They're not something that still exist. We have to take a break. We'll come back. We've got more with our guests. Stay tuned. This is Darkness Radio. With the book you've got out, it's officially released on November 22nd, The Omniverse, Transdimensional Intelligence, Time Travel, the Afterlife, and Secret Colony on Mars. Talk to me a little bit about the secret colony on Mars. How do we know that this actually exists? And every day we see something in the news of somebody saw a Bigfoot on Mars, somebody saw a Land Rover that was left over on Mars, somebody saw a microwave left on Mars. I mean, it just seems to be a joke at this point that there might have actually been something there of any substantial nature besides some running water at one point. What do you believe is actually the truth?
Yeah, well, based on my investigation and personal interactions and interviews with about a dozen persons who have been at the secret bases on Mars, and based on my study of the Mars rover photographs, in my capacity as chairman of the Mars Anomaly Research Society, I believe that there's good reason to conclude that the U.S. has had an active colonizing presence on Mars since the 1960s, and that in the 1980s forward, this expanded under the aegis of the Mars Colony Corporation, whose chief operating officer was a guy who flunked out of Yale when he was a sophomore, and I was a freshman. His name was Richard B. Cheney, and that Dick Cheney has behind the scenes been sort of the chief operating officer of the Mars Colony Corporation, and I've interviewed Marine officers who have been deployed as part of the Marine contingent guarding the civilian Mars colony, members of the civilian Mars colonies. I've spoken to a number of different people who have been on Mars in many different capacities, and I myself had my first book, Exopolitics, my first book in this area, was called Exopolitics, which founded the science of exopolitics, was in fact time traveled by the CIA through secret time travel from 2005, when it was published back to 1971. And so that the CIA had 40 years advanced knowledge of my kind of reporting in this area, and so the national security state follows not only my reporting but the reporting of a whole group of us who are whistleblowers, Mars experiencers. The Mars experiencers include the current President of the United States, Barack Obama, who in 1980 was at the College of the Siskiyous, attended a summer Mars preparation course there, and then performed a number of jumps to Mars via the jump room technology. I've spoken to his roommate on Mars. I've spoken to
Dr. Andrew Bashago. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I've spoken to three people who interacted with Obama on Mars, and it's all congruent what they say.
But isn't there, and not meaning to throw a monkey wrench in, but Basiago has also claimed he's going to win the 2016 presidential election. And first,
I spoke to him yesterday, and that's not what he claims.
Okay, well, it was, he made the claim, I think, a year or so ago on another show, and that's why I was curious where that came from.
He says that he has been told by CIA time travel, who in fact pre-identified George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton as future presidents. He was told back then that he would be a future president, but he doesn't know the year. And, you know, he may or may not be a future president. He unlike Bush Jr., Bush Sr., Clinton, and Obama, Andy Basiago chose to become a whistleblower and to go public on this. So I don't know what effect that is going to happen. That is going to have on as to whether or not he becomes a president. But that does not at all, I think, undercut any of the research that we've done with his colleagues, and any of the research that we've done, in fact, on Bush Jr., Bush Sr., Obama, and
but doesn't it seem like if time travel exists,
identification,
if time travel exists and you have whistleblowers, it would be easy enough to eradicate those whistleblowers by just simply traveling in time and taking them out of the equation before they blow the whistle.
Yeah, and in 2005, I was a speaker at a conference in Hawaii when I received a call from Andy Basiago stating that he had just been talked to by a representative from the George W. Bush White House that told him in no uncertain terms that if he continued to speak out about the secret Mars programs and the presidential pre-identification program, quote, they could not guarantee his survival. And so we went public with that. And because of our aggressive publication of this, we believe that we may have played some role in keeping Mr. Basiago, a whistleblower, along with a number of these other whistleblowers alive. And I'm very happy to have done that. And I say that as a civil liberties lawyer who was, has represented people in going back to the Panther 21 trial in New York in 1969, as a representative of the New York civil liberties lawyer, and so I have myself, whenever I see what I think to be a violation of the Bill of Rights, and I taught the Bill of Rights at the University of Texas in the government department. Well, I'll speak out, and sure, I spoke out against the Bush White House on that point, and I made it public. And I've been on CNN, I've been on all of the major networks, and I was lucky enough to have this access, and so they haven't been able to knock off any of these witnesses yet, and God willing, they won't be knocked off.
Right, and we'll pray for your continued safety. The book does come out November.
I'm in Canada. I'm safe.
Or they want you to think you are.
I'm a dual citizen now. I'm out of the line of fire, and I can be of my most service by being in Canada, where it's much more difficult for the assassins of the Bush crime gang and the CIA to take us out.
All right. Well, we will continue wishing you good luck with that. The book, The Omniverse, Transdimensional Intelligence, Time Travel, the Afterlife, and the Secret Colony on Mars, officially launches on November 22nd. You can go find it on Amazon.com. We have a link to our guest's website, to the book site, and more. Go check that out. We need to take a break. We'll come back. Open phone lines if you have questions, 651-989-5855, 651-989-5855. We can discuss what our guest has just spoken about for the last hour and a half. We can talk about your own experiences. Whatever you'd like to discuss, it's all on you for the next hour and a half here on Darkness Radio. We just spent the last 90 minutes speaking with our guest, Alfred Lambermont Weber. His book, The Omniverse, Transdimensional Intelligence, Time Travel, the Afterlife, and the Secret Colony on Mars. I'm getting a lot of really harsh emails and social media comments. But let me say this. Sometimes the greatest minds have a much better ability at mapping things out in writing and putting it together in a book. The book is fascinating, and it's a really interesting look from the press release and the stuff that I got. That's why I thought he would be a great guest to have on. Sometimes they're not always the best orators. I, like most of you, had a hard time following some of the points that he would try to make, and I think maybe that's because there's so much information, so much knowledge he's trying to share, although there seems, Tim, to have been a lot of holes.
There are,
in the theories of what he was explaining, and I couldn't get him to pin down. In one breath, he's saying that, you know, we've come up with ways now to do repeatable exercises, experiments, and, you know, do this, and we've set protocols, but then science doesn't acknowledge this. Well, you can't use the word science. Well, you can, because science is a science. Science is a form, and in order to progress, they have to have parameters in place. And if they can't even agree on what the rules of those parameters are, there's no way to put it into a category to say this is repeatable, because science will dismiss it.
Right. And you were accurate when you said pseudoscience, because you can't prove a regression as far as hypnotherapy goes over and over and over again. You can't return to that exact same experience. Sometimes you come up with different results.
Or you can, but then how do you know that you're truly getting a regressed memory and not somebody who has a deep fascination? I grew up with a guy, Rick, who was really into the Civil War, read the Red Badge of Courage, and, you know, loved the American Revolutionary War, Civil War stuff, used to paint miniatures. He was in a miniature club, fascinated, knew the ins and outs. Well, I would be willing to bet you dollars to donuts if we did a past life regression on him, he would be somebody that died in either the Civil or the American Revolutionary War, or perhaps both.
Yeah.
And then how would you be able to discern between what his fascination is? What came first, chicken or the egg? The fascination, which taught him, so when he releases into a hypnotic event, that's what's releasing the information to him. He's calling on all of his knowledge that he has, or was he drawn to that knowledge because of past experiences? And there's no scientific way to map out a repeatable way to prove that this is a real experience and not a vividly imaginative experience. And that's part of the dream issues. That's why our brain is smart enough that while we sleep, it kicks out that what's the word I'm looking for? Anesthetic. To keep your body from running in place or punching or you know, doing whatever it takes, because the brain is having an experience and can't discern between that being a reality or a dream.
Well, now, we do have a caller on the line who wants to talk to you about the theory about dreams.
All right, John in New York, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dave, how are you?
I'm doing well. John was keeping me company during the social media blitz of people commenting on the topic. And, John, you had a lot to share on this. What did you make of what the guest had to share? And you know, do you feel that he was hitting on some points that made sense? Or
I do. Yes, I do. Yeah, I think he was hitting on a lot of the M theory. That's what I was taking it as. And what I want to ask Alfred is, what's his feeling on the dreams? Stephen Hawking had a very good theory about dreams, how it's another reality, another realm that we're living in. Stephen Hawking actually said one time in his dreams that he walks around.
Right.
And what I would like to know is, do you feel that the dreams are another realm that we're living in, another dimension? And I'm going to use the word M theory, because that's where I think that this is a conversation is going to, is M theory. Do you think that we're basically in the multiverse of, you know, when we dream, we're in another area of what we see?
Well, we've had many I'm always hesitant to use the word expert. We've had many experts on the show who've researched this and are fascinated by it, and that is their belief, that the dream realm is just another level of existence. And that's why we have, because one of the things that I always found curious about some of my dreams was I would have sequel dreams where I would have a dream, and I know this is picking up from a dream I had years ago. And it's just like I've just stepped back into that dream, into that consciousness, and I'm conscious of that moment when it happens in the dream. So is lucid dreaming, these places that we visit and sites that we see and things that we do, is that another form of reality and consciousness, or is it nothing more than just internal in our brain and it's just chemicals and electrons firing off?
Right. That's what I want to know. Right.
Yeah.
Is it another realm, or are we just, is it make believe?
Well, I think that's part of what everybody discusses when they talk about the holographic universe and all of these different theories, and that we have the God particle within us, that we have the ability to create, and that when we die, heaven is what we've always perceived it to be. Hell will be what we've created it to be.
Right.
And
I think they actually aren't they trying to prove that right now? The God particle.
Yeah, but how do you, again, there's only, it's a lot of conjecture. It's a lot of theory and ideas bandied about. But again, how do you, we would need to be able to sit down and set a protocol for this type of deal that would be acceptable across the board. And I think that would be insanely hard because, I've talked to some of the greatest minds in the skeptic field, and I'm fascinated by people like Dr. Michael Shermer. And I love the way his mind works.
Right.
I love the way his mind works, and I like the practical look at it. And I've talked to illusionists, and I've seen illusionists do things that to anybody else would seem supernatural and outside of the realm of normal, hence paranormal. And if our mind can be that easily tricked and deceived, even though we know it's being tricked and deceived, but we still believe that what we're seeing has a hint of reality to it, I just don't see how anybody could come up with a set of protocols everybody's going to be happy with.
Well, do you remember what I said to you, glimpses, when I said glimpses?
Right.
Like, are we seeing glimpses of what is there in that multiverse of what we, you know what I mean? Like, you know how people, they think they see ghosts or they think they see UFOs or something like that? Is it glimpses of, like, a different realm that we're living in? We're kind of getting that little grasp, that little bit of, like, a taste of what is out there.
Could it also be things along the nature? Okay, let's remove the idea of multiverses. Let's remove the idea of alternate realities and parallel universes. Let's just submit that there's only one existence and it's taking place right now. There is no future. It hasn't been mapped out, and the past is unrecognizable. We can't go back to it. But if we are truly all energy, which we know science has proven we are energy is connected. Could it be that these moments in dreamscape or whatever we are is nothing more than wires crossing with other people's wires? We're seeing glimpses into their realities or their dreams or their mental, experiences. What we perceive to be an alien, is it because it is an alien or because of what we're picking up from the person that we're tapping into energetically? Much like
it's like that holograph,
right. Because when people talk about when people talk about the fact that they're connected, you start to think about Tim, and all of a sudden my phone rings and it's Tim. You start to think about a friend and somebody you haven't talked to in years, and suddenly there's an email from them. We've
all had the old grandma saying, when your ears ring and someone's talking about you, that whole kind of concept, right?
Right, exactly. And could it be that we are just energetically connected, and that these moments and these things that we experience are simply overlays of something else that's going on? And a lot of times we experience what people perceive to be the paranormal in moments when our consciousness is not always necessarily focused, right? We're folding laundry, we're sitting on the toilet, we're just, kind of your mind is out there in the stratosphere anyway, and then you hear something or you experience something. Well, again, could it just be at that moment your receiver is wider open and you're actually picking up on an experience from somebody else nearby, somebody you're connected to in your family?
Right.
And
it's that connection. It's
right.
That connection, right, of every being, everything, every life force that could ever happen is what's going on. Right. I can go with that, yeah.
Right. All right. Fascinating stuff. Jen, thanks a lot for giving us a call. We have to take, we got another break here, Tim, we're up against. Is that right? Yeah, so let's take a break. We'll come back. Phone lines are open if you want to debate, talk about this, have different theories and beliefs, or you have your own paranormal encounters. You can give us a call, 651-989-5855, 651-989-5855 to be a part of Darkness Radio. Own Mind. I think it's a fascinating article with a great look at how the brain works and how it understands and perceives things. You can find it by going to TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com. TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com, keyword darkness, and you'll be able to find that and all of the other cool things we've posted as well, including one of my all-time favorite paranormal encounter stories that we talked about last week on the show. A mom who related her parashare story, calling herself world's worst mother. It was truly one of the best stories we've read in a long time. Made me laugh physically out loud. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it as well. Go check that out. But Science of the Paranormal, Can You Trust Your Own Mind? That's the new article we're going to place up on the site. Tim, you look at this stuff, and again, I'm fascinated by it all. I really wanted this interview to go more smoothly. I liken it much to the interview we did last week. I think that the topic is interesting. I think the content is interesting. I just, unfortunately, both of the authors did not seem to be able to convey this concept properly.
That's fair, yeah.
And I'm not putting them down or slamming them. Like I said, sometimes it's a lot easier to write out these thought out ideas than it is to try to share them orally. And we know that because sometimes it's hard to even ask the questions when you know what you want to ask, but you don't know how to get there. That's why, a lot of times people will say, you pause. Why do you go? Because sometimes I want to try to figure out a different way to ask a question, or is there a way to get to what I really want to know and not have this generic link? So I can only guess on the other side, how do you convey this big universal message in a soundbite?
Well, there are a few that can do it.
Right.
There are a few
Very
people
few,
who
right.
deal in science that can do it because they do have time to write out that particularly long theory and make it make sense. And then they submit it to an editor who says, you know what, you're still not making sense to me. Here's how you do it. The other thing that perplexed me about our guest, too, is he's a lawyer or claims to be a lawyer. If you're a lawyer, at some time or another, you have to go in front of a judge or a jury, and you have to be able to explain your concept or get your argument across in order to win your argument and win the case. If you can't summarize it, even in a closing argument or on a program where you have limited time, let's say this particular author went on a show where he's only got 8 to 10 minutes in a segment to describe what the book is about and what his theory is about, he wasn't going to make it. He just wasn't going to make it. The longer we went on, it seemed the more complex and kind of muddied the water became with the entire theory in general. So, yeah, I guess it's a good lesson to all scientists out there that are aspiring to be an author and have their work published. You have to publish at a third grade reading level, and you have to communicate as such. Otherwise, you're not going to get your point across.
Right, and that's not putting down you, the listeners, or us as hosts, but sometimes you need to simplify the theory behind what you're speaking about. And I really felt like there was a lot there, and I was afraid 2 hours wasn't going to be enough. And unfortunately, in 90 minutes in, I felt like I still hadn't even cracked the egg.
You'd hit the wall.
Yeah,
pretty much.
It was, trying to get past that. Fascinating guy, and I wish him a lot of luck with his book. I do have to laugh, though, as we talk about, not at him, but we talk about things like the concept of time travel and whistleblowers and the danger. And again, if you believe that time travel exists, I don't believe whistleblowers would exist. I really don't, because if there's this dark shadow, covert government conspiracy that wants to keep us quiet, right? They would have very easily they'd have popped in, grabbed Lee Harvey Oswald, popped out, and had him up actually in the book depository, right? They would have done what they needed to do to make more sense of the claims that are made, and they would have erased Andrew Basiago, or they would have erased our guest from the timeline already.
Yes.
They would have just gone in and seen where they were going to be the hiccup in the society, or right before they started to become the whistleblower. Because I understand if you go back and take them out of the equation from birth, you might also upset the balance of the experiment that they were running. They may have needed the experiment to go to a certain degree, but once the person gets to the point of wanting to talk about it, it'd be easy enough to
get rid of him.
And you know what? You wouldn't even have to kill him. You pull a Weeping Angels on the guy. You go, you pick him up in the past, just before he whistle blows, you take him further back and throw him into, 1873, when everybody will just think he's a raving lunatic.
There you go.
So, interesting stuff. We're going to take a break. We'll open up phone lines. If you have your own paranormal encounters you'd like to discuss, what are your thoughts on time travel? Will it ever be proven? Can we time travel, and can we do it in our own minds? Give us a call, 651-989-5855, and be a part of Darkness Radio.
To Hour 3 of the best in paranormal talk radio, Darkness Radio. I'm Tim Dennis, sitting in for Dave Schrader. A couple of reminders before we get going here. Our guest is Robert Neil Marshall, and I'm telling you, this hour, folks, is going to blow you away. We're going to be talking about Back from the Light, coping and surviving after a near-death experience, and talking about what you do with your loved ones who have had a near-death experience. And just, I tell you, it's a fascinating hour, but we'll get to that here in just a second. A reminder that darknessevents.com, you're going to want to go and get your ticket right now for that event in February. It's Dave, myself, Bill Chappell, and a whole weekend of new inventions and ghost hunting at the Haunted Historic Palmer House Hotel in February. Again, you just click on the banner. February 24th through the 26th, 2017. Makes a perfect holiday gift for that loved one at the Palmer House. And I tell you, all new seminars, ghost hunting. It's going to be a great weekend, but limited spots. So you're going to want to go right now. Click on the banner, darknessevents.com. Plus, Michael and Marty Perry will be there. They'll be doing a gallery session. But, of course, that's not included in the event ticket price. But it doesn't matter. Come join us. Haunted Historic Palmer House Hotel, Sauk Center, Minnesota, February 24th through the 26th. Also, a week from tomorrow, Saturday, November 19th, IWI returns to the Haunted Historic Mounds Theater in St. Paul, East St. Paul. It's family-friendly professional wrestling. I'm your vice president and MC for the evening. It is Hollywood Brian Sager's last match before he retires. He is our U.S. champion. All 3 titles are on the line. You're going to want to join us out there for a historic night in IWI wrestling. It is also the IWI Hall of Fame induction ceremony that will be going on as well that night. Lots of stuff going on. Get your tickets at moundstheater.org. Once again, moundstheater.org for tickets there. And I also want to remind you that I do a pro wrestling podcast, TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com. Just put in keyword wrestling or look for Extreme Pro Wrestling Radio. A brand new episode went up last night. Extreme Pro Wrestling Radio. Look for it on iTunes. It's there. Subscribe to the podcast. It's myself and Sean Horsch. And yes, I just get plain silly with the thing. So be sure to look for it there. Let's jump into this hour, shall we? It's going to be a very interesting hour indeed. Our guest is Robert Neil Marshall. He's the director, co-producer, a filmmaker, and a near-death survivor after 100% blockage on August 3rd, 2013 caused his heart to go into ventricular fibrillation. I can never say that word right. Otherwise known as the Widowmaker. That's all you need to know about that. We'll talk about that and his near-death experience as well. He went on to make a film as part of a very personal journey for himself and co-producer Yvonne Sneeden to help others, their families and friends who have been through the same, as well as an instructional aid to medical personnel who deal regularly with near-death experiencers, but do not often comprehend the depth and personal impact of this phenomenon. Robert met Yvonne Sneeden at an IANDS conference where she was presenting a workshop on the subject of after effects. They joined forces to produce a documentary, and Yvonne is also a survivor and speaker as well. Robert used to have many psychic experiences prior to his near-death experience, which we'll talk about as well, particularly pertaining to aviation. However, since his near-death experience, the volume has been turned way up with new paranormal communications coming through at odd times, plus new perceptions of life and death as a result of his near-death experience. Back from the Light is a documentary film that explores the difficult phenomenons of after effects that occur to individuals who have had a near-death experience. Those after effects have a long impact on not only the experiencer, but for loved ones, family, and friends. And the website, you have to go watch it, folks. There's a trailer up there, backfromthelight.com. Let's welcome to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show, Robert Neil Marshall. Good evening, Robert. How are you?
Good evening, Tim. Thank you so much for having me on board on your show. I love your show. I was just saying I loved you had your Eddie Munster element on recently, Butch Patrick, and that brought back a lot of memories from my childhood, and it was a lot of fun. So, thank you for sharing that.
Oh, absolutely. Many years ago, we had Pat Priest on too, and that was a kick.
Maryland, yeah, exactly.
And anytime we can get on somebody that we've had on, or somebody that we watched on TV as kids, I mean, it's a kick for us. We kind of mark out. It's a wrestling term. We fanboy out quite a bit.
Well, you guys do it. It's great. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I got to jump right into this, Robert.
Sure.
Near-death experience is one of those things that has intrigued me ever since I was young. It's and when you look at it, you've got the scientific skeptic part that automatically wants to poo-poo the near-death experience as something that is chemical, although they can't quite claim chemical superiority and say this is why. The science doesn't quite line up with the experience.
No, not at all. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. And then there is there's the experiencer themselves that kind of gets put out on an island. And a lot of what I love about this movie is it explains it from the experiencer's point of view and what happens not just after, because on this show we deal immediately with the experience and immediately what happens afterwards. But in this movie, you go into the afterlife of the afterlife, don't you? What happens in your daily life long after you've had the experience, and how the family has to deal with it and how they have to deal with it afterwards.
Right. People don't think about how difficult it really is to go through something like that. And of course, as one of our guests on the documentary talks about, they're interested in the light show. They want to hear about how I left my body and I could look down and I could see this and so forth. And as you said, science has many explanations, and spirit and religion has many explanations. And then there are explanations of people who've been through it who don't have a particular faith or belief one way or the other. It really runs the gamut. But we learned that it's not so much what we had happened to us while we were gone that matters as much, because that's only seconds of our life. It's living with it when you come back. I mean, if you could try to fathom for a moment the concept, and even to this day, it's very surreal to think back and say, I was dead for a minute and a half. I mean, my heart stopped, my breathing stopped. They say after 30 some odd seconds, your brain stops. Yet I had full consciousness during that time, and I didn't even realize to a degree what had happened until I came back, and it was so disassociative that then you have to think about, wow, from the moment I was conceived and my heart started beating, it had never stopped. In my instance, because people have all sorts of things that happen to them, mine was a heart attack, that my heart actually stopped for the first time in what was then 53 years. And it takes a while to fathom that happens, and then to want to talk about it or share that experience with others. Some people are very fascinated by it, and some people come very quickly with reasons why you've made this up. And it doesn't matter to science or religion what the heck happened to you while you were gone. The fact is, once you come back, you have to live the rest of your life knowing that you've been through this experience. And you do feel different, and you do think differently, and the world is different, and you feel very alone until you if you're lucky enough, through this IANDS, International Association of Near-Death Studies, which I stumbled across trying to look things up on the internet. What did somebody else experience? What did they feel the same things? What happened to them? That I realized that we're not alone, that there are many, many people who have been through near-death experiences, or some even call them spiritually transformative experiences. In other words, some people, I technically, physically, clinically was gone. I mean, I died, but there are other people who maybe through tremendous emotional stress, emotional situations, certain drugs, other things that happen, they have a transformative experience where they check out and experience many of the same things. And the symptom, I guess you could say, that ties us all together is the after effects. There is literally now research that has been done that shows that there are a certain number of definable after effects that seem to validate the experience. Like something's happened to you for real, somewhere, somehow, if you can demonstrate these after effects.
Take me through just real quick your near-death experience. And I know, and I don't want to dwell on this for a long time because I have I have a lot of questions, and actually I have a scenario for you from the other side, from a person who is trying to deal with someone who's had a near-death experience, because this has just been gnawing at me all week long. I told you off air that I've been looking forward to this all week, to talking to you, because I have a scenario that I wanted to throw at you as someone who has survived a near-death experience to see if you understand it from your side. And we're going to get to it later in the program. But take me through your near-death experience. How you had the Widowmaker, you had the big heart attack. My dad had the same, the Widowmaker. Although he did not
did he make it through?
He did make it through. Although he didn't report having a near-death experience. They hit him twice with adrenaline to the heart. Came through it, had a triple bypass, and all was well.
Right.
But what happened
with you? They say a lot of heart patients don't have near-death experiences, and a lot of patients don't. There are a lot of people who either that or they're afraid to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it, or they think that it's just a dream that happened to them, some sort of a dream that they can't comprehend, and it takes people sometimes years to come to terms with it. And there are things about it that people don't always remember right away. And one of the interesting things is there were certain elements of it that I remembered quite vividly from when it happened to me, but there were other things that I did not remember. And I was going for a cardiac rehab evaluation, like a stress test, and the tech at the cardiologist's office was like, well, did you see the light? And everybody asks you that question. Did you see the light? Did you see the light? Like, well, yeah, I saw the light. There was a light for sure. Mm-hmm. And I said, but I don't remember all the details of it, but a lot of it. And she said to me as a tech, well, if and when you're ready, you're going to remember. A lot of people do. And I hear that is fairly common. If you really break down a lot of these near-death experiences, not everybody is telling you something that they remembered the second that they came to. There is a series of images and dreams and very powerful emotions that you carry with you, and then things sometimes suddenly come back to you in really powerful flashes. Which some people have said, well, how do you know that you're not making that up, that this isn't your imagination? And the only way I can explain it is that when these things hit you, it is like not only reliving it, the emotions, it's more powerful, more real than me talking to you right now. It is like sometimes we have dreams that are so powerful and so vivid that you believe you're living it, that you're awake. It's more powerful, whereas sometimes you can't remember what you ate for breakfast the morning before. It's different for a lot of people. So that's the impact, the power of it, in the way it happens. So your dad, he may still at some point have something that will come back to him, or maybe his mind has blocked it because it may not be necessary. So
it's almost like a flashback.
To a degree, but it's more than a flashback. It's like a live back is the only way I can explain it. The power and the emotion of it is so incredible, depending on when and where. But as I said, there was a lot that was incredibly powerful and vivid that happened to me while I was technically gone as well. But there are like gaps and holes and things that I want to know more about that I don't remember, and things. I encountered a family member, my grandmother, but my grandmother didn't look like my grandmother at all. And there were other forms that were there. I remember very vividly the encounter with my grandmother, but I don't remember communicating at all with these other forms. But I'm certain these were family members, friends that I loved that had crossed over. But I cannot remember those conversations. It doesn't mean they didn't happen. I don't know.
When you saw your grandmother, did you see her? When you say it didn't look like her. Did she look younger, or was it just different, or how so?
No, completely different. And I'm kind of telling this out of order, really.
Sure,
but
no problem.
There was a moment when I'm shooting through outer space. Is the only way I can explain it. One minute I'm in the ambulance, and I'd been suffering from these chest pains. It was really, really bad, and I had gallbladder issues, which were diagnosed after the fact. I didn't realize it was gallbladder, and they can be really, really painful, and they can simulate a heart attack. Well, this time it really was a heart attack, but I thought it would lift, it would go away. But it was higher up in my chest than I was expecting, and I was supposed to go away the next day, and you're thinking, oh my God, if I call 911, I'm going to ruin this whole trip tomorrow. Not like dying wouldn't have ruined the trip too.
Yeah.
But you don't want to call the ambulance. This will go, and I think a lot of people, men in particular, but a lot of people were afraid to call 911. We're afraid to take advantage of that. This will go. I can deal with this. What are they going to do to me? So we talk ourselves out of it. And frankly, for everybody, if you have any question whatsoever, always call 911. Don't even get in the car and drive unless you have no other option, because frankly, if they did not have a defibrillator in that ambulance, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. In fact, had I waited another 2 minutes, something in my head said to hit the button when I did, after walking around for 45 minutes, going in the shower, feeling pain, maybe this will lift, trying to do something. I even heard a voice in my head that said, kiss my spouse and the dog goodbye for closure in case I died, which I laughed at, but I'm like, why am I thinking crazy like this?
Wow.
I'm sorry, can I say that on the radio?
Well, technically no, but we'll keep going.
Okay, you'll bleep me if not.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I finally hit the button, and within 2 minutes of getting into the ambulance, they asked me a few questions. They said, can we take the top of your robe off so we could get some leads on you? Because I started to complain about my arms, the pain in my armpits. I originally presented with indigestion, and that's the thing. You don't know what it is. Once I did that, I found out after the fact from the paramedics that the alarms went off for them, that this was not just indigestion, something serious. And as soon as they asked me if they could open my robe and put these extra leads on me, next thing I know, I am literally floating in this golden light with these dark figures and these shapes. And I'd been up all night long and dreaming and felt like I forgot that I was sick, that I was in an ambulance, anything. And I am shooting through outer space and literally the stars expanding. And it was like exhilarating at the same time as feeling really, really chill. But to me, I was back in bed dreaming this. This was not... It wasn't real, but it was more than real. I didn't question it. I had no idea where I was, but loving this ride. And then I see this, I sort of transition into this darkness, and people called it like a purple darkness, but it wasn't frightening. It was like a womb-like, very comforting to me. And I see these beautiful, beautiful shapes, and I've talked to other near-death experiencers who've gone, oh my God, yes, that's what it was like for them. And it was this luminescent, almost mist light shape that was just neon colored, vibrant, glowing, electric, just sort of flowing. And what's interesting is there's an artist named Kevin Gross, and spiritfireimages.com, if you look him up or Google him, he has done these fractal drawings, mathematical fractal images that another person showed me. And I'm like, oh my God, that is like what I saw. It's not nearly as vivid, as bright, as colorful as what I was experiencing, but it was something about fractals, which are like universal, the mathematical equations that's in everything, every part of life. And yet here are these figures, and I'm going, wow, that's like what I saw. As the front one comes towards me, this mist is reaching out and sort of wrapping around me, and I start to feel this incredible love pouring into me, like filling me. And when I say love, I can't even describe it in words, and many other people have said that. It's like the kind of love you feel when you're standing on top of a mountain and there's a beautiful sunset and the breeze is just perfect and you've done everything that you ever wanted to do. You've accomplished it. You've packed it. You've done the taxes. You've paid the bills. You've packed everything away. You're ready to kick off your shoes and sit back and relax, yet exhilarated by the breeze, by the sunset, the beauty. It is like the love that a mother has for a child just softly in their arms, or a parent with your child. It is that kind of love multiplied a million times that I'm feeling. And as this happened, as this figure in front of me started to connect, I just knew it was my grandmother somehow. And I started to get really excited. And at the same time, I was not surprised. All of this made sense to me. This looked perfectly natural, like I would expect this. But at the same time, I was in awe and overwhelmed by the emotion. And as this mist, this color, this light began to pour into me, and I suddenly realized it was my grandmother, I flashed back to a real moment in my life 20 years earlier when, after my grandmother had died, her birthday was the day before mine. We were very close. It was my maternal grandmother, that I went to visit her grave. And because I happened to be near LaGuardia Airport, I had a car. I hadn't been there in years. And as I'm sitting there missing her, rocking, I could feel her presence come into me then. Like I just felt her with me, and I was missing her, and I was feeling this love, and I was going, I can feel you inside. I was so blown away. This is in real life many years ago. And I started sobbing. And then I'm back with this figure, her, this mist, light, beautiful thing. And I said, this feeling I have right now, this feeling, it's the same feeling I had that time when I visited you. And then this voice in my head, whatever, I didn't have a head, it was just me there communicating. She said, the reason I showed you that then is so that you would recognize this feeling now and know that this is real.
Wow.
And that kind of like blew my mind. And I'm like, I knew this. And then things sort of flashed. And next thing I know, I am literally crazy thing. I'm in this place with like thousands of stars around me again, but each star was like a moment of my life. And all you had to do was like look at one and bam, you're suddenly there in the middle of it. This was my experience. Other people have similar, other people have completely different experiences. But I was suddenly in a sled, a plastic blue boat that we had when we were kids that would use in a swimming pool or a lake, but you could use it in the wintertime as you're going down a hill. And I'm in this boat, and I could feel the snow in my face. I had feel this knit cap I had on, my big down jacket, and I was about maybe 12 years old. And my younger brother was in front of me in this plastic boat, and we're plowing down this hill. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm seeing this, why I'm looking at it, but I'm reliving it. I was living the whole thing. And at the bottom of this hill, there was a chain link fence. And I remember thinking to myself, we're going to smash into that fence. And I thought terribly, oh, good, but my little brother's in front of me. He'll hit the fence before me and buffer the crash. And this was a real, and it was like all like coming back to me, like, oh my God, like every detail. And then I felt this terrible remorse, like how selfish of me to think about my brother's pain as something that would cover and protect me in a situation like that. And it was like, I've got to apologize to my brother. I've got to tell him I'm sorry for what I did, for what I said, you know? And then the scene flashed again, and I was suddenly in this other place where I was in our apartment that we used to live at in Manhattan many, many years ago, and I could see the whole room in detail. And there were lights at night outside, and there was sort of a raised radiator around the windows, and you could open the windows by pulling a handle, and they opened part way. And I could see this wallpaper that was sort of this woven flock thing on the wall where we used to have a cat that would climb it and hang on to the wallpaper. I could see all these bottles of booze on this little bar area and this little silver ice bucket with the bent tongs hanging. I mean, everything. It was so real. And I had a tough childhood at times, and I was now about 6 or 7 at this point. And I climbed up on that radiator, and I wanted to jump out of the window onto Central Park West and kill myself. And I just thought, I don't want to be on this planet anymore. And I was reliving all of this in tremendous clarity. But this voice this time showed me that if I weren't on the planet, if I were to check out now, there are hundreds, if not more, thousands of lives that will be affected by my presence here. It was like a ripple effect, like a stone in a pond, and these ripples go out. That it wasn't just me. Every single one of us on this planet, we have a ripple effect. Sometimes just a random act of kindness can make a difference in somebody's life. And by virtue of work that I ended up doing, I ended up introducing people to each other that then fell in love, and then they got married, and then they had children. Or I then was in a position to give somebody a job or an offer for a job or give them training for a job. And then they went on and their careers did amazing things. And people have come back and said, a lot of what I do today is because of what you taught me. And we realized that every single one of us, we're all interconnected. And I had to be on that planet because I had a responsibility to everyone else. It was no longer about me. It was about who I would affect and the message that I would share. And if I could touch people emotionally in some small way to make them feel better, make them feel stronger, brighter, or, like I said, even people being on this planet. And that was really a powerful message for me that I apparently had to bring back and make good on. And part of one of the after effects is figuring out, like, why didn't I die on that day? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do with this? Many people say that in the documentary, because we interview 35 some odd different people. We narrowed it down, but we have people like Dr. Mary Neal, who's New York Times #1 best-selling author, To Heaven and Back. She died kayaking. For 13 minutes she was gone and went through a horrific time, but was told a lot of things about what she had to do. And people say, back to what you said about the, this is something that is just the dying brain. It's a lack of oxygen. Mm-hmm. I don't know how in those moments, in a minute and a half, that the dying brain could fill such detail and such emotion. And I've heard people say that, well, they can stimulate parts of the brain electronically to stimulate that part that sees vision and whatever. And famous Eben Alexander, who has a couple of books out now about, He was one of the famous ones because he was a neurosurgeon who then died. And when a neurosurgeon talks about it, people seem to pay attention. If you're just some normal, dude off the street, well, maybe you're making it up. But the doctor says it. Maybe there's truth to it. I don't know.
We've had him here on this show too.
Yeah. Oh, you had Eben there. Okay.
Yep.
So you know.
Yep.
So in talking about the sensation, Eben himself had said, and at this one conference, he said, when they stimulated people, they had the visual sensation, but they said they felt like they were manipulated like puppets, like there was a puppet sort of feel to it, like there was a mechanicalness to the way that these visions were. And if you've been through it yourself, there is such emotion, such vividness, such power that it takes your breath away, and we carry it every single day for the rest of our lives. If that's just the essence of a dying brain, then you know what? If I just know that when the time comes, it's not going to be painful because everything's shut down, stopped. I passed the threshold. 1 second I'm here, the next second I'm there. It was that easy. It was that beautiful. It was that simple. So obviously I didn't go all the way because I came back. I'm here.
Right.
But I say to my friends, if I were to have gone all the way, it wouldn't have been any worse because the worst was over. I had already checked out of this planet. And wherever I was, if this was an in-between stage and there is nothing more, which I don't believe for a second, but if that is true, then I can guarantee anyone it is the most beautiful, joyful, peaceful thing that you will ever go through in your life. But at the same time, we're here because we have to be here, the things we need to do. So people say, well, why don't you just check out? Why don't you just snuff yourself then if it's so beautiful? Because that's counter to why we're here and what we're supposed to do.
Well, now, Robert,
suicide in the film. We do talk about suicide and people who want to be back in the light. It's very tough.
Robert, we're going to take a break right here. When we come back, we're going to tackle an issue having to do with leaving those behind. And we're going to talk about the survivors left behind after this near-death experience and having to face them when you come back and the survivor's point of view. Because I'm going to raise an interesting question having to do with your case and other cases when we come back. I can't wait to ask you this question and bring the scenario up to you. It's coming up next here on the Best in Paranormal Talk Radio. Our guest is Robert Neil Marshall. And check out the trailer during the break. Backfromthelight.com. When we come back, why don't you love me more than death? That's the question we'll ask Robert Neil Marshall here on Darkness Radio. You got to see the trailer. You got to get behind this thing. You got to see it. It is something else. Robert, before the break, I teased you with the question, why don't you love me more than death? Now, let me explain this. When you watch the trailer online, you do see a lot of the near-death experience survivors, and I think we can, I don't know if you've had this experience maybe with loved ones yourself, but you see a lot of them say, oh, it was such a beautiful experience, and you even described it yourself in the last segment. It was perfect. It was beautiful. It was this. You described it much like the love that a mother has for a child in this perfect scenario. And people in the trailer describe it as, you know what, if I could go back, I would. But in the meantime, you have people who love you more than anything on this earth. You have people that want you here. You have people that would feel like they were going to die if they lost you. And they don't understand why you would ever choose death over them. Ever.
Yeah.
And is it fair to say that the person who's gone through the near-death experience doesn't understand the survivor who's left behind and doesn't understand their perspective of what you felt?
No, not at all. If anything, it is that love of that person that brings us back. Because we come back for a reason. We don't stay. We're not the ones that die, at least in a near-death experience. I mean, people who die. I can't speak for them. But we come back because of our love for those people, to be there for them, to support them, to do whatever it is we have to do. If anything, it seems to be, I can't speak for every near-death survivor. Other people may differ, but I think there's a common thread here that many, many, many of us will say. It is that love for the people that are still here that brings us back, that draws us back, that makes it why we're here. That doesn't mean to say that we don't get what some will refer to as homesick. And I don't mean home in a Christian or a religious way. I mean homesick for a place that you really, really love. But that we have a responsibility to those people because we love them. And yeah, there's no longer a fear of death. I mean, death is not what it was before it happened. The fear, the unknown, the when is it going to happen? How's it going to happen? What's it going to feel like? Yes, there is pain getting to that point. If it's through an accident or illness or something, there's horrible stuff you have to go through. It was very painful to have a heart attack like that. But then when it's gone, it's instant. There's no suffering. So we understand that, but we have that responsibility to those family members. And it's hard for them because they did almost lose us. They're shattered and shaken. And for me, it was like just a short amount of time. And I had to go through an angioplasty and a stent. And it was very surreal. I call it my alien abduction because it was sort of what it was like, because I didn't really know what people were doing to me and all of this. And I'm in and out of it, not knowing how serious it really was. But I'm feeling pretty darn chill through all of this. And, people are coming into the room the next morning, which I thought was like, 35 minutes later. It's been hours. And I'm like, hey, guys, how nice of you to come visit me. And they're shaking, and they're all, taking hours to find out where you're going to live. And we're just like, hey, how you doing? It's a little freaky, to say the least. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
you are.
It's because of those people that we are back. And sometimes if life gets difficult, and this is a very difficult world that we live in, and a very trying world, and a very negative world that we live in. No matter what your political views are, no matter where you come, what your financial situation is, life on this planet is one of the hardest, most challenging universities, experiences, exercises, whatever you want to call it, that any of us will go through. And there are lots of very difficult choices, and we suffer through many different things to see how we survive, how do we handle it, how do we learn to treat others, and how do we make it through that. And when you've experienced that kind of joy and that peace and that tranquility, and school is over, the holidays have begun, to quote C.S. Lewis, it's very challenging. And I feel like when my job is done, whatever job is, and it's not done, I get to go home. Mm-hmm. I look forward to that moment, because it's like, hey, when I'm done working on this job, I get to go to St. Thomas and lay on the beach and, watch the waves splash and, feel the warm sun on my face again. It's that kind of a feeling. But I can't go to St. Thomas or any other island until I'm done with my work. And that's kind of a driving force that keeps us here, contrary to when people say, well, wouldn't it be just so easy for you? No, it's not. They don't understand. It's not an easy out.
Let me ask you this. As you were filming the documentary, as you're talking to the families of near-death survivors, did you ever get the impression that they felt like a part of their near-death survivor died with their survivor? Like they became so permanently changed by their experience that they're not the same person they were before?
Yes, I've heard that many times. And if people want to see the full documentary, as you can go to the website, we've got pre-sales already. It's going to be fully released on a limited release, December 4th. But you'll see that many people do talk about that. I don't get the same person back that I had. And even PMH Atwater, who's a researcher, she writes a lot of books on the subject matter, and within the near-death environment, she is well known as a researcher and an experiencer herself. She talks about all families want is they want the person back that they lost. They don't, which is very different. We're not going to be the same. You cannot go through what we've been through and be the same, because we have a very different perspective on things. And some people learn to put up with us. They learn to understand that we talk a little crazy sometimes, that we act a little sort of, tree hugging. I will literally, say to my other half, like in the springtime, I can feel the trees alive, the energy. There's these bushes that literally, with all the little buds, I can physically, viscerally feel a vibration, an energy coming out of them. There's an appreciation for something that I never felt to that degree. It's not something that I just sit around and say, I think I'll make this up. I literally feel it. It is real to me. I'll say, feel it. Put your hands, feel like this heat, this warmth coming off of something. And they look at you like, no, I'm not exactly seeing or feeling that, Mm-hmm. So, it's that real for us that, yeah, it becomes difficult for other people to not have that person, but they have to adjust. If they understand a little bit about what we go through, then they can learn to adjust a little bit too, and we try to adjust for them. We have to understand that they did lose something, but they didn't lose us completely, because in this instance, we're back, and hopefully for the rest of a good lifetime.
Robert Neil Marshall is our guest. Again, Back from the Light is the name of the new documentary. Go to backfromthelight.com. Like Robert mentioned, pre-sales are available right now. Go check it out, backfromthelight.com. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about, as a near-death survivor, is it possible that you can exist in your previous life, or do you need to move on to a new one? We'll talk about that when we come back next on the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio. Exciting and interesting documentary about near-death experiences and the survivors, both the families and the survivors of near-death experiences. Robert, I teased before the break. Do you need to move on when it comes to near-death experiences and in your new life? Can you embrace the old life? Do you need to move on into your next life or a new life? And here's what I mean by that. You find out when people come back from having a near-death experience that sometimes they acquire gifts, or they get gifts. Yourself, you mentioned in the last segment that you feel more in touch with the earth, that you can sometimes in spring that you can feel the trees, you can feel energy. Some people acquire telepathic gifts or psychic gifts. Some people get different things when they come back from a near-death experience, and they get a different outlook on life even. Is it possible that you have to just shed your own life, cut your ties, and move on and embrace these new gifts?
Well, it's interesting the way you phrase it. It's not so much cutting the ties. It's like we evolve, I guess, to a certain degree. We move forward with that who we were before. I mean, certain things that maybe happened before, psychic gifts, if some people, believe that, if you feel that, some strange things that happened to me when I was younger, where I would see things and feel things as they were happening, that scared me. But now everything, like the volume got turned up really loud, and other people have referred to that as well. Things that just were seemingly odd, just everything got loud at this point. So we take that and we move forward. We are changed. We are different. We can't go backwards, but we are still who we were, but we are. And people have said, well, gosh, I wish I could have a near-death experience so I could experience that. And we talk a lot about this because I speak on this matter, and there are groups that get together and people talk about it. You don't have to die to have these things. I believe these are universal truths that everybody can experience and can have. But we live in a world where those voices, if you want to call it psychic or sensitivity or whatever, feeling the beauty, we are all part of that same universe. We are all still part of that same energy. It is the noise of life that crams our heads. So when we have things that happen to us, we blow them off as coincidence. We shut our minds to it. We change around the factor so we don't hear it. If we could clear our heads and open our minds and hearts a little bit, you could experience the same thing where I'm not special because I got kicked in the head and had a heart attack or other people did. I mean, that's a heck of a way to have it happen. Mm-hmm. Other people, through being quiet in their minds and their heart, can go there too and feel that experience.
Interesting. You know what? Psychic powers intrigue me anyways, and I've been told throughout the last couple of years, oh, you need to develop this. This is an important thing for you to develop. I feel like I'm about as psychic as a stone, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know,
it's listening. It's listening to that voice and learning. It's a language. You need to understand how these messages come. I mean, if you're talking to people, let's say people say that I can hear relatives talking or dead people talking, or someone like John Edward, who's a psychic who had a TV show, remarkable TV show. It's a long-distance phone call, guys. It's not exactly like you're just going to get it, unless you get it in smaller symbols and smaller, ways of hearing and thinking. And sometimes it's just letting go and giving trust to it. And it's something that needs to be developed. Some people are naturally more inclined. Some people have gorgeous singing voices. They're born with them. They open their mouth, it comes out. It's a miracle. Other people really have to work at it, but they can sound pretty darn good if they work at it. I think it's an acquired skill, but it's not an impossible one, if that makes sense.
Does make sense. With just maybe about 3-4 minutes left here, Robert, what do you want people to get out of this documentary that you put together, Back from the Light?
Well, I want people not to be afraid of that transition. The word death, as I started to say, it has a very, very horrible connotation, particularly for the people who are going to lose people that they love and that they care deeply about. That is the horror. That's the sad part. But people move on at various ages for various reasons. I want people to have confidence that when their time comes, and not before, that there is a beauty and a peace, and it's part of a natural progression, like being born and what we do living our lives. If you are going through an illness or you're going to lose a family member, don't close the door to what's happening. People are so scared and so frightened that they shut down exactly when that person who's transitioning needs you the most. They need you to be supportive. They need you to be there. They need you to fill that time with love and make it a beautiful transition, because we're all going to have to go through it. We can't escape it. They say death and taxes. Well, maybe some people can avoid taxes, but we cannot avoid death. And we're going to go through this, and people need to learn to, from a place of love and comfort, and know that there is some continuum. Thousands and thousands of people, because of medical technology now, are coming back to talk about something remarkable. And whatever it is, that transition is an easy one. And we have so much proof in so many other ways that there is some kind of communication, even beyond this, that shows itself over and over and over again. I'd say open your heart and mind to that. And my God, you'll go forward with a much sweeter, warmer, loving soul and a feeling in your heart of sharing and appreciation for what this life really is about. I think that's something we can take away from it.
I got to know, with just about a minute and a half here, as someone who's survived a near-death experience, do you see it as a mistake for the rest of us who are medically trying to avoid death, trying to find ways to live to 100, 200 years old? Are we all just fools trying to do it?
No, not at all. I mean, if medical technology can keep you living and keep you on doing what you're supposed to, that's what I said. You're here for a reason. There's something we all find what your reason is. Find your purpose. Even if that purpose is just to be kind to other people, is to teach people something, to share something, to be a teacher, someone of knowledge, something to give of yourself. If you can live to be 100 years old and still be giving and doing, then you are fulfilling your purpose. So no, medical technology should keep us here as long as we need to be. But the fact is, people die as infants in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and the bulk hopefully live to be old. But people go at any time. So fill that time with something really wonderful. But yes, stay here as long as we can and do what we need to do. This does not negate that by any means. This is about living. This is about life. All
right. Robert Neil Marshall has been our guest again. Back from the Light is the name of the documentary. Check it out, backfromthelight.com. Go watch the trailer. Pre-sales, folks, are going right now on the website, and it will hit limited release on December 4th. I encourage you to watch it, get inspired, and learn a different side of near-death experience. This is truly a unique and exciting documentary. You got to watch it. I tell you, I get chills just talking about it. Go check it out right now. Backfromthelight.com. Folks, Monday we'll do Parashare. It's Supernatural News, and we'll keep you updated on situations as they progress with things here at Darkness Radio. Again, I'm Tim Dennis, and have a great weekend, folks. Enjoy life, live in the moment, and we'll see you on Monday. Again, George Norrie and Coast to Coast are next. You've been listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio.